Kia ora koutou katoa. Probably hear me full of cold a bit this morning. First Thessalonians is one of 7 letters in the New Testament that is considered authentically written by the Apostle Paul. The other 6 letters that are in the Bible that purport to be from Paul are either trying to moderate what he said or just flatly oppose what he said. That's why, for example, an authentic letter like Galatians says that power and role differences between women and men have been obliterated in the Jesus community. There is no longer male or female. But then a moderating letter, Ephesians, says, wives, submit to your husbands. And an opposing letter, 1 Timothy, silences women and their leadership. To quote the scholar Dom Crossan, what this means is the radical Paul is being de-radicalized, sanitized, and Romanized in these latter letters. His radical views on, for example, slavery as well as patriarchy are being retrofitted into Roman cultural expectations and Roman social presuppositions. The spin doctors were spinning Paul's radical vision into something that fitted with Rome. 1 Thessalonians is the very first letter of Paul's that we have chronologically. That also makes it the very first writing of any kind that we have from any Jesus author. It's usually dated to about 49 to 50 CE, so about 20 years after Jesus' death and 15 years after Paul. There are some pieces in other parts of the New Testament that we think have a very early origin, but they are things like the Magnificat that have been placed in there by St. Luke into that gospel, rather than the whole gospel being written early. Before I go further, I should mention that I align with those who consider Paul to be a mystic rather than a moralist. And here I'll draw on the Franciscan Richard Rohr. His community's website, called the Center for Action and Contemplation, is worth a visit. Rohr writes, I believe Paul creates the mystical foundations for Christianity. Don't let the word mysticism scare you. All I mean by mysticism is experience-based religion. He sees in wholes, not in parts. Paul sees a bigger picture of oneness. He sees not only the fundamental oneness of genders, of races and classes, and the socio-political consequences of such a vision of oneness, but also notions like weakness and strength, which also, if you break down those divides, have social and political consequences. Paul loves to teach by viewing issues from multiple perspectives, but is also not afraid to take a side, an overtly political side, which not much might not be liked by all the community, or by later biblical transcribers and editors. Hence the later subversion and discouragement of women leaders. This issue of oneness and taking sides is worth exploring for a minute in our 21st century context. There's a strong organizational culture in churches, indeed in many groups and organizations, for there to be unity, meaning no dissent, thinking the same. rather than, as in times past, simply doing what the ministers and ruling elders say. This desire for unity can manifest as all contentious decisions being discussed until a consensus or an overwhelming majority agree, which unfortunately means most of the time most churches don't take sides on contentious issues. And when churches do take sides, it's usually after a majority of the general population have already aligned there. But Paul, I believe, points us to a better understanding of oneness and taking sides. A healthy Jesus community should not shy away from encouraging strong opinions and having processes and opportunities to discuss them if members wish. It should not shy away from expressing socio-political opinions, even when others in their congregation don't agree. But this requires a degree of trust in and goodwill towards one another, as well as some courage. So a member can say, I don't like or agree with a statement or what the minister has written or what a billboard says outside. But on other issues, most of the time, I do like and I do agree. I think this is what oneness is about. Not uniformity, not a dampening down of differences, but mutual respect and trust in each other, and including at times robust disagreement and a taking of sides. As St. Luke continues to strongly align with social justice movements, expressing our long concern about poverty, inequity, racism, women's rights, queer rights, and the honouring of te tiriti o Waitangi, we will evoke criticism, both externally from neighbours, political parties, other churches, and at times internally. We will not all think the same, and we should not expect that we'll all think the same. We will not all understand each other's opinions all the time. Oneness is a big picture word about commitment to diversity and plurality, and a vision of a world of justice where past wrongs have been put right and new foundations laid. But it is also usually hard work. Lastly, in this first reflection, I want to say a little about the text today, paraphrased from 1 Thessalonians chapter 4, verses 13 and following. It's a series of admonitions and words of encouragement. Note that living in peace is about living out that vision of oneness and diversity, trust and political advocacy that I've been talking about. It's not about submerging differences by enforced compliance or beneath a veneer of never trying to offend anyone. It's particularly, though, the last verses that raise people's eyebrows, with always see the good, and always rejoice, and pray without ceasing, and give thanks for everything. They're a little problematic. If, for example, prayer is saying words, then how do you do that ceaselessly? And if prayer, following people like Mary Oliver, is paying attention, then how do you do that ceaselessly? And how, or even should you, rejoice always? What about at a funeral of a child or of a murderer? Are these verses just hyperbole? Again, I rely on mystic intuition to make sense of these. I think these verses about trying to live and move and have one's being in rhythm with, floating upon those strong positive currents of connectivity with all, in all, animate and inanimate, with the best, like goodness, joy, and gratitude, a trinity which all support and feed each other. Goodness, joy, and gratitude. To use another set of metaphors, I think these always and without ceasing point to a different way of seeing the world. Not being blind to what is, but reaching for the possibility of the impossible. Endless goodness, joy, and gratitude may manifest just not in one's own life, but in our community life and in structural and organizational ways in society, where all genders, races, and classes can flourish. The second reflection is on a poem called Travelling Light by the Celtic Christian poet Pádraig Ó Tuama. I suggest you pause this video and just Google Travelling Light by Pádraig Ó Tuama and you'll find it and have a read. The poem plays with two meanings of light. Light as opposed to heavy, and light as opposed to dark. And it's a very fitting poem for this time of Advent. Pádraig begins with the word travelling, which resonates with the Christian notion of journey, both physical and spiritual. Sometimes we travel heavy, he writes, those heady times. Here he is suggesting that when the spiritual journey is primarily a head journey, then it's heavy going. Whereas when the journey is more of a heart journey, then the feet are lighter and even given to dance, freeing the body. The second verse is about travelling in the dark and the hard spiritual paths where there is seemingly no sun or moon or stars or fire lamp to see by. Loss and grief can be like that. So can anxiety and fear. Sometimes we just put one foot in front of the other, hoping there will be ground beneath us, hoping we will not stumble. Staying still seems like staying in the dark, and so we walk on, not sure where we're going or want to go. A word of caution about the light-dark metaphor. It's been used, and in some places continues to be used, in a way to reinforce racism. I'm referring to the false narrative of dark and therefore dark skin pigmentation being bad, and light skin pigmentation being good. This is a very destructive narrative that can sap the self-esteem of many children and the adults they become. It behoves those of us who are Pākehā of a pink-white pigmentation to be careful how we use the light-dark metaphor, and for us to remember that it is not fundamentally a binary metaphor. For both darkness and light are part of a 24-hour day cycle, each necessary for the other. Light and dark are part of a oneness, just as loss is not apart from love, nor fear apart from joy. To know the depths of love and joy means we will experience loss and fear. In Pádraig's third verse, he talks about traveling solo, lonely, missing and forgetting those who love us and in whom we find home. This verse segues into his last, and arguably his most powerful verse. Here, instead of heavy, dark, and lonely, there is hope. Hope comes as light. Hope is light to carry. Coming not to blind or burn or overwhelm, but coming in circles and waves. Metaphors from physics lessons. And also from spiritual lessons in small moments, coming to find us. So light is not just what is emitted by the sun, created by making a fire or a manufactured torch. Light, illumination, understanding is that which seeks us and brings in its kete and its kit hope. And light sits lightly on us. So a word about Advent, that truncated season of the Christian year. Its colour is that of heavy, dark and lonely, like Lent, like funerals. Colours of loss and fear. Sometimes strange hymns and even stranger readings are heard, telling of disasters and death, and of yearning, longing, in the midst of disasters and death, with people pinning their rapidly diminishing dreams on a new world order or a new world saviour or something less tangible. Like somehow there would be a lightness to their load, a light for their paths, a home for their loneliness. Somehow the coming birth of a peasant baby, conceived out of wedlock, born to refugee parents, born among animals, unsanitary animals, in a land under cruel military oppression. Somehow this coming birth would open the possibility of all things turning towards hope, the possibility of the impossible. And this is Advent. God bless you.